Hello and welcome to Perspectives, where we take a deep dive into the issues of the day and where we take a look at people's opinions on such issues. I'm Sheiton Atigari, filling in on this edition for Ruth Osime, who is unavoidably absent. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. Thank you for staying with us. As we all know, domestic and sexual abuse are typically manifested when the abuser exerts power and control over the victim. This abuse can be mental, physical, economic, or sexual in nature. Victims of such behavior face many complex reasons for staying silent, as they may fear retaliation from the abuser, including physical harm, threats, or stalking. They may also worry about the safety of their children or other loved ones in the environment. Abusers are also very good at manipulating the abused, making them feel ashamed or believe they are somehow to blame for the abuse, which can make it difficult for them to reach out for help. Worse still, the abusers often isolate their victims from friends and family, making it harder for them to speak out. At some point, the victim may also feel too ashamed or embarrassed to tell anyone about what's happening. Some even make excuses for their abusers and live in abject denial on how bad and toxic their situation has become. There's also the issue of financial dependence, where the victim is financially dependent on their abuser, which can make it very difficult to leave the relationship, not to mention that their self-esteem would have gone to the dogs at this point. Another worrisome factor is that depending on who the victim reports to, sometimes whether people will believe their level of abuse, most especially when the abuse is emotional or psychological. To end domestic violence and sexual assault, we all need to be part of the solution. Well, we're headed for a short break, but stay with us because we will shortly be back to introduce our guest, Executive Secretary of Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, Titilola Vivour-Adeniyi, an economist, teacher, and trained therapeutic counselor, and Ogunlesi. Perspectives will be returned in just a moment. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. Thank you for staying with us. We've now arrived at that point when we bring on our wonderful guests, starting with Titilola Vivour-Adeniyi, who currently serves as the Pioneer Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, where she leads her team of over 100 dedicated professionals. Titilola has spent about 15 years in public service with Lagos State government in different capacities. She has been instrumental in ensuring a proactive and coordinated response to sexual and gender-based violence in Lagos. Having worked with national and international organizations, Lola continues to provide technical support for the development for the response models for other states of the Federation. While also joining us for this discussion on perils of domestic and sexual violence is Ogunlesi, an economist, teacher, and trained therapeutic counselor. Despite her academic achievements, nothing could have prepared Ogunlesi for what young love, faith, and a chance ordeal had in store. At the age of 24, she married the man she loved, a family friend she's known since she was 10, and love blossomed for the newlyweds, and Annie felt she was living her dream. Then it became a nightmare, and her book, 33 and Standing, is a story of resurrection and second chances. Ladies, it's a great joy to have the two of you on the edition of this show. Of course, when we talk about sexual and domestic violence, it's never a positive thing. But what I think is positive is the fact that we're here today looking at the best way to help victims or future victims get out of the situations that they are in. Yes. So I'll start with you. Of course, you've done a lot of work, on sexual violence and, even domestic abuse as well. Can you talk to us about this, the current statistics in Nigeria and even Africa? People still believe that it's something that is, I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but they don't know how rampant it is. Can you bring us up to speed as to exactly what the figures are saying now?
Thank you so much for having me. I think globally, it is reported that 1 in 4 women will experience abuse in their lifetime, and 1 in 6 men or rather 1 in 6 boys would experience one form of gender-based violence in their lifetime. Bringing it home at the DSVA, where I'm privileged to work at, last year we provided services to 6,333 survivors. On average, we receive on average of 200 new cases monthly. And we know that we've not scratched the surface because these issues continue to remain some of the most pervasive crimes. And it's not peculiar to us in Lagos, Nigeria. It's a global phenomenon. It is said that for every 1 case that is reported, 7 have gone unreported.
Wow.
Right? So it is, SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence, truly is not a respecter of age or class or creed. Anybody can be a victim or a survivor.
All right, then, thank you so much for that. But I'd like to bring it to Anne, of course, who is joining us from the studio. Now, let's talk about, your book. I mean, I've caught up on it, and there's some very alarming, disturbing details, especially we talk about the relationship between you and your ex-husband. Can you bring us up to speed as to exactly what happened? I mean, what I've been able to gather is he stabbed you 33 times and left you for dead. Can you speak to us about that? Miraculously today, you are still alive to tell your tale. What did you have to do to make him finally stop? Can you just bring us up to speed?
Thank you for having me, and it's a great opportunity to be on your show. So thank you very much. So I married the love of my life, and he was a very kind, loving person. His family and my family knew each other, and we were like family friends ever since. So I knew him from the age of 10, and he actually said he will, when I grow up, he will get married to me. And I found that very amusing because at 10, what do you know? So, but as fate will have it, when I came back to UK, we met and we kicked off the relationship again. And that's when I got married. I got married at a very early age of 22. And then this happened when I was 24. And on that fateful day, we were just, young couples, loving couples. We were just sitting and having fun. And he was just talking to me about the moon and other things on that day. And that's how he came and he said, he just brought out the knife. I don't know how. And then he just stabbed me that many times, 33 times. And I know that I'm alive today because I am still meant to be here. Thank you.
I just want to, just further push on that, because what you've described is, a lovey-dovey couple. It didn't seem as if anything was wrong as of the time you were together. So are you saying that there weren't any indications, any indicating factors that showed that it was possible for him to do something like this?
I didn't see any of that, because in those days, you don't see anything like that. We don't really talk about mental illness. We don't talk about things like that. So there was nothing of that sort. Yes, as normal couples, you argue. So we did argue. We had our moments, but it wasn't anything to that kind of violent of, I've seen the signs, or the red flags were showing. There were no red flags were showing, so I'm not quite sure what really happened, but I don't think the person who did what they did, stabbed me 33 times, was not the person I got married to. It was like 2 different people that I saw on that fateful day. So I was like, no, this is not the person. Somebody else has gone into his body and taken over him. So it was just 2 different things that I've never experienced before or seen before.
All right, I'd like to bring it back to the studio. I mean, you've heard her story, very, very tragic. Thankfully, she didn't lose her life, because I can't imagine people that have been stabbed less number of times have lost their lives, but that's not the situation here. Now, in a case where, I was asking her about indicating factors, whereas, whether the person is pretending or whether the person has mental health issues, what's your advice for someone that finds themselves in that kind of situation with a partner who then starts to exhibit that kind of behavior? And if you're in a situation where that behavior isn't even exhibited and it just comes to you as a surprise, how would you, what's the advice to, get out of that kind of situation?
First of all, let me just appreciate Miss Ogunlesi.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ma. You epitomize who a survivor is, and we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
Survivors that we've spoken to have told us that they saw the red flags. But then they felt that, the person would change. So they see the red flags, some see the red flags during courtship, and they feel that marriage will change, or God will use them to change the person, right? But the truth is that domestic violence is not something you can wish away. It's not something that you can afford to be in denial about. And when it does happen, it's not always that it first happens as physical. It could come across as emotional, it can be verbal, it can be silent treatment, Once it happens, it's important for you to address it head on. And addressing it head on may be just to speak about it. Oh, what you did, I don't appreciate it. And then if the person you're speaking to is now being overly defensive or gaslighting you, making you think that you're making a molehill, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, then you need to address it and escalate it. Escalation doesn't necessarily have to be jail. Escalation can be family members, this is what I'm experiencing. Or you speak to your somebody that you revere and the alleged abuser respects, that can call such a person to order. And if that has happened and we don't see any changes, then you need to escalate to government or to an NGO that can address the issue holistically.
And you said something that piqued my interest. You said, there are people that hope that the person will change. And very quickly, with the work that you've done, has there been any case where maybe the person started off showing, the red flags, and then eventually that person, the person didn't end up exhibiting that behavior, or does it always lead to that kind of excessive behavior?
So we've had some success stories where alleged abusers admit that they have a problem. I think that's the problem. Where most perpetrators are in denial. They say nothing like that happened. In fact, if I knew your officer, I would have reported before her, if it's a man. But we have situations where the alleged abusers are honest enough to admit that they have a problem. If it's a mental health problem, anger management issues, and then we can refer such a person to access psychosocial support, therapy. And then they are worked on and they improve on their communication skills and coping mechanisms. Nobody is born an abuser. Abuse is a learned behavior that can be unlearned if the person is willing.
I'd like to bring it back to you, just because you've also spoken, based off of the information that we have, he's now passed away. So I wanted to just, find out how you felt when you learned about his death. And I also want you to talk to us more about the first policewoman that came into the scene of the crime, even though you were soaked in blood, there was something that she said to you. I'd like you to share that with us, even as we now talk about the victims being believed themselves.
Oh, thank you. What happened was when the stabbing continued, and I believe that God is in need of my life, because I kept on hearing the voice, stop talking, but I didn't, and I kept on talking, and I believe that's why the stabbing went on for so long. But one thing I do believe was that in that room, I believe God was there with me to say, you have not fulfilled your purpose yet. Your purpose is yet to be revealed. So as I stopped talking, the stabbing stopped. And I believe that's when he committed suicide. He jumped from the 13th floor. And I believe when he hit the bottom of the ground was when the foundation of the building shook. And that jolt me back into life, because I believe I was actually just phasing out. And then I thought, where is he in the building? And that's when I called for an ambulance. For myself, I called an ambulance for him, because I was thinking, what are you doing on the floor there? You know? And I was just waiting for the ambulance to come so that I'd be able to, but I was feeling weak, I was feeling tired, because I was losing a lot of blood. But I managed to open the door, and I remembered the woman, the first police officer, walked in, and she said to me, I do not need to say anything, but anything I say will be used as an evidence against me. That we are charging you for murder. And I'm thinking, what she's saying? My brain was not really in tune with what she was saying. But then the paramedic came in and he said she should stop talking, that we might lose her because of her jugular bone. So I heard that one, because I was going in and out, in and out, in and out. But that was the last thing I heard the woman say to me. And then from then on, I don't know what really happened. And then I knew I was taken into the ambulance and I was gone into hospital. So, yeah, that's what she said to me. And I remembered it very clearly, that what she's saying, but my brain could not process what she said.
Oh, wow. I mean, you think about these kind of situations, and I would like us to talk about, you know, how victims are even believed. But before we go on, we're going to just go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation on sexual violence and domestic abuse as well. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. Thank you for staying with us. I'm still with me in the studio is Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, Titilola Vivour-Adeniyi, and also economist, teacher, and trained therapeutic counselor, and Ogunlesi. Now, just before the break, you were sharing, you know, your story, and even after you had gone through such an ordeal, what the police officer had said to you. And, you know, it brings me to my next question about, you know, victims being believed. In hindsight, do you believe that maybe you should have, you know, maybe sought professional help to enable you cope better with your trauma? And I also want to ask how you felt when you visited his graveside. Have you been able to finally forgive him? How have you been able to get over this healing process?
Oh, thank you. So during trauma, I definitely had to go through therapy. I needed that because so that I would be able to cope better. But I also had the support of my family and friends who were around me and who actually helped me. I remember just before the first year of his anniversary, my elder sister actually said, so what are you doing for that, for the first year anniversary? What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know what I wanted to do. And she kept on asking and asking. And I believe that God will always use people to help you to get to the next level where you needed to get to. And she said, oh, maybe you should go and visit his graves. And I said, I don't think so. And you know what? This went back and forth until the week that it was going to be a whole year. And then I decided that I was going to go. And even I went very reluctantly because I didn't want to go. Because I was hurt. I was in pain. I thought, why? What happened? So there were times I blamed myself. Maybe I could have done better. Maybe if I had done this, maybe this would not have happened. And my brain was just all over the place. I could not really say this is where I was. And then I made that decision that I was going to go. Even when I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. But I believe that thing, you know what, is orchestrated. And I got there and I just started talking. You know what, just normal talking. And then I started crying. If anybody asked me why was I crying, I had no clue. I just started crying. And I cried and I wailed. And in between that, I kept on saying the things that were really on my mind that were hurting me. And you know what, through where it came from, I believe that I really needed to release him from my heart so that I can feel released. And then I said, I forgive you as I forgive myself. And that was when, you know what, even though I cried the more, the wailing stopped. And I felt peace. That, yeah, it doesn't mean that, oh, the trauma and everything else has been forgotten. But, you know, I just had a sense of peace and a sense of relief that, you know, like a weight off my shoulder has just been lifted. And then I went home and I began to, you know, put the pieces of my life together. And I would say it was after the first year that truly the healing process started. And I was able to actually come to terms with what has happened. But for the first year, I kept on walking in that emotional roller coaster. I had days I would blame myself. I had days that I was thinking, why did you do this? Why didn't it happen to somebody else? I'm the youngest in my family. You know, I was just in a very emotional state that I was not stable in anything I was doing. But I believe that after that year and I released him, I believe things began to work out for me. I began to feel a bit of peace, a bit of healing. And then, you know what, I began to speak about it, even though it was very hard because I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to, you know, put it under the carpet like it never happened, it never existed. And, you know, we'll just continue with my life. But you know what, every now and then, you know, a family member will bring it, or either my sister will talk about it. How are you feeling? Or my friend will ask me a question. And you know what, and I believe that that was how my healing journey and my healing process actually started.
And thank you for being, you know, so strong and dealing with it head on. I want to bring it back to the studio. I mean, you've listened to her story. And I think for me, the first thing is the victim blaming. You know, when these things happen, people ask, why did you stay? You know, you knew that he was capable of doing such things. And secondly, you've also spoken about the fact that sexual violence is more straightforward than domestic violence. I want you to talk to me about those two theories, the victim blaming and why you believe sexual violence is more straightforward than domestic violence.
Okay, so victim blaming is, I mean, in a pool of blood, her pool of blood, it appeared that the police was blaming her, right? Yes. It is an issue that we're faced with. And the victim blaming comes from different sectors. It comes from the society. It comes from the family. It comes from institutions. And it also comes from the survivor themselves. As she said, you know, they go through it, they start to come up with conspiracy theories. If I didn't do that, if I put the food on the table at 7 p.m., he wouldn't have beaten me and all of that. So it's a problem. But the truth is that it is never the victim's fault, right? The person that we should address, the person we should put the spotlight on is the abuser. It is never the victim's fault. I say sexual violence is more straightforward, not that it's
not that it's better.
Yes, but it's straightforward in the sense that, okay, let's give an example. A child has just been defiled. A child has just been sexually abused.
Yes.
The immediate response should be medical. Ensure that the child is able to access medical attention, collect and preserve evidence, refer to the nearest designated police station for investigation, and then the criminal justice process commences. When we're talking about children that have been sexually abused, the issue of autonomy, I want to prosecute or not, doesn't really come in because a crime is committed against the state. But DV is not so straightforward. You have situations where I had a survivor tell me that what is justice for her is if I had a torturing room in my office where I can put him for 3 days and torture him, let him feel the pain she has been experiencing, and that was justice for her. I said, I laughed, thinking she was joking, but when we told her that was not available, she left. So it's not as straightforward as sexual violence. Survivors want different things. But most survivors want the beating to stop. They want the relationship. Don't forget there's love. right? It wasn't, there was, some people say it was love at first sight. And then along the line, something happened, and then this person changed and all of that. So it's not so straightforward. And being a survival-centered agency, the survivor is at the heart of our operations. We cannot be doing something that is contrary to the wishes and the desires of the survivor. Of course, certain instances, we come in as government to put our foot down. But then it can also backfire. Backfire in the sense that when you go all out, rescue, charge the case to court, the survivor court says nothing like that happened. So what next? What is the response from the government? Right. Meanwhile, it is clear there's evidence.
Or shouldn't there be a way to bypass that? Because if you have a victim that is living in fear of their abuser,
yes,
and for some reason maybe the abuser has been able to manipulate that victim's statement, isn't there anything that the government can do to still protect? It's almost like taking a minor in, knowing fully well that the minor can make that decision
at that time.
Yes,
the law allows us to do that, to go to court without the consent of the survivor in that particular case of domestic violence. You can even remove the survivor from that environment, place the survivor in a home. You can even go as far as empowering the survivor, securing accommodation. But if that survivor is not with you in terms of your case plan, that survivor can go back. Or the alleged perpetrator can come in to the house that you've rented for him or her. So we are very, very heavy on ensuring that the survivor is able to access psychosocial support, because we want the survivor to own the process. It's not that, oh, government said I should stay, or government said I should leave. We empower you with information. You get to the point where you realize that you deserve better. And then you own your narrative and you own the process. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, it does. I mean, talking about psychosocial support, I want to come back to you, Anne, because you also said some people actually blamed you for the incident. I want to know what you did to protect your state of mind from this extremely unfair judgment on you. And I see that you are also a therapeutic counselor as well. Is that maybe what made you go into that line of work because of your experience?
People started blaming. You know what? I think that the first instance that I experienced was, there was a day I was coming back from work, and it was my right of way, and I was driving home, and there was another car, and there were some guys, and I think some female. I don't know how many of them were in the car, because I wasn't really. I just knew there were people in the car, and he was now saying I should move out of the way so that he can go through. And I say, it's my right of way. You need to move out of the way so I can go through. And the next thing that came out of his mouth was, do you want to do to me what you did to him? And that really, it just killed me there. I thought, what? And I thought, everybody knows about this? And you know what? He drew me to side. I couldn't even move. I froze for a while, and then I then began to drive home. And when I got home, I parked. I sat in the car for a while, and I thought, what was that? And it was like, just go home. And I just got out of the car and I went inside, and the first thing I did was pick up the phone. And I think I called a friend of mine, and it was him, and I spoke to him. And he said, oh, just discard it, this. Apparently, he has been hearing a lot of rumors about it's me, but he was trying to protect me. But it was coincidental that it was him I called to say, this is what I heard on my way back from work. I don't even know these people. Probably they know me, I don't know them. But this is what they said to me. Back another journey, because I was thinking I was making progress. I wasn't. It took me, it's like taking 10 steps forwards and 50 steps backwards. That's how I felt. And I was in that place for a very long time. That, is this how people see me? They are already judging me. And I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to go to work again. I just thought, I can't do this. I was saying I wanted to relocate. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to leave and run away from all of this. But you know what? I then realized that, no, that's not the point. You have to face it head on or it will haunt you.
Yeah.
And then I just, how I got through it, I believe it was one step at a time. And the more of the affirmations and the encouragement I was getting that you are making progress, you are doing well. And I just kept on going. I kept on going. I kept on going. But I got to a stage in my life and I thought I wanted more. And I heard going to counseling. And I believe that counseling was really for me. I thought I was going to use it to help people, but it was, I studied it to help me because I had to do maybe about 250 hours of counseling for myself over the 5-year period that I did it. And that in itself helped me on my journey because I was also able to offload, unburden, and say how I felt or how things were working for me, how I have bottled a lot of these emotions up. And I was reacting to a lot of things that were happening to me. And that really helped me to understand who Anne is, who Olufemi is. That really helped me along the way. So I began to rediscover who I am so that I can be able to help and be able to work and help other people. So that's when I went into counseling. It didn't really occur to me, and I believe God knows what he's doing. So he knows that you need healing. So when you are healed and you are able, you can go and help others because then you can say, I've been in these shoes, I've worn the t-shirt, I've taken it back off. But you have to be in the place whereby they can see that, yes, you have really walked that path and you really understand them. So that is why I went into counseling. Thank you.
Then. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you, Anne. But I want to bring it back to you, Lola, to talk about, success stories because it's one thing to talk about the cause and, people's experiences, but then we should also touch on success stories and the lessons that can be learned from it. How are they able to overcome these horrible experiences? How are they doing now? And how exactly, if there's anybody that is watching this that wants to reach out to your team to be able to help
light has gone off. Is that okay?
Get out of that experience, what do they need to do?
Okay, well, so success stories, it depends on the perspective you choose. Success story, the first one that comes to mind.
I think maybe a good indicator of a success story is somebody that came out alive.
Okay.
I think that would be, yeah.
Yes, so the first one is very interesting. The lady got married they celebrated their union on Saturday, reception. And on Monday, she was in the office. She came to report that her husband had
2 days after getting married,
had beaten her up during, in the evening of the reception. And the next day she says, oh, I want to sign a divorce, I want to file for... So obviously she didn't understand what she had just gotten herself into. And then that's one of the cases where we called, because she said she wanted us to engage him, not to escalate. And we called him, and he was vulnerable enough to admit that he had a problem.
Okay.
So, and because of early intervention, I mean, this marriage was just 2-3 days, we were able to come in and, address what the issues are. We found out that when the clinical psychologist conducted psychological assessment, they found out that he was actually bipolar and he had started to hear voices, so a bit of schizophrenia. So it's at that point in time, the psychologist had to escalate to the psychiatrist who had to now put him on meds, right? But he could not access, or they could not access those services if the lady did not report. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. They now have a child, and when we follow up, we hear good reports that, okay, they're coping and physical abuse is no longer happening, and they are improving on their communication. The other case is a mixture of sexual violence and domestic violence. Domestic violence, the woman, unfortunately, came to report an incident, and she had said that she had reported to the family. They had even convened they tried to do family intervention. And of course, norms, religious considerations came in. You cannot leave your house. God hates divorce. A woman must submit, and all of that. And so she stayed on. But then something happened. She said one day when she came back from work, she caught him, her husband, fondling with her daughter's genitals. And so she raised an alarm that, domestic violence, now sexual violence. So incest. So at that point, she escalated again to the family. And then at the point when they came to the office, it was her father that brought her. And that is very rare, where you see that kind of support system. You know, most times survivors are isolated. They don't have that backing, you know. So it was the father that came in and said, the issue about him and her is separate, but this one about him
and his
allegedly
and his granddaughter,
you know, is something that we will not tolerate. And so we were able to investigate. Unfortunately, there has been a breaking of the hymen because it had been repeated. And so we had to, you know, charge to court. He's currently in Kirikiri serving time. You know, so that's why I said success to who?
Success story
Obviously not for him, but, you know, for her and for government. And, you know, with that support system, she was able to pick up the pieces of her life. And then, you know, she was able to start a business, and with intense psychosocial support. You know, some people ask, how long is the counseling for? For some people, it may be for their lifetime.
So is this counseling free?
All our services are free.
All right,
it's the Lagos State government. All our services are free. We just want you to make yourself available.
Okay, but can we just flip it before we go back to Anne? Because I mean, a lot of these cases, and even while we were off, somebody had messaged me and said, why do you have only 2 women? Men are also abused. What are the myths that surround, you know, whether it's sexual violence or domestic violence against men?
Yes. Because
it always seems as if the focus is
on women.
Fine, there are more cases of women, but then we also have cases of men. And there have been certain situations that I've been privy to where a man would rather die than admit or report that his wife or his significant other is the one that is abusing him.
Yes. I like data. Last year's data, we attended to 333 men that reported different forms of violence: domestic, economic, verbal, stalking, harassment, deprivation of access to the children, and all of that. Sexual abuse of boys, we have those cases where a boy is sexually abused by an adult female or an adult male. You know, patriarchy is not only the enemy of women. Patriarchy is everybody's enemy. It is patriarchy that will keep a man in silence. That, oh, if I report, they will laugh at me. If I report, they will think I'm not a real man. But the truth is that, yes, we know that women are more on the receiving end. I mean, the data is clear. But we are not, that doesn't negate the fact that men can also be victims or survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. And the truth is that there is no shame in your pain. If you are experiencing this violence, please do not hesitate to reach out and access support.
Thank you so much for that. Now, I'd like to come back to you, and I mean, we've been talking success stories, and of course, even the data surrounding, you know, the elements surrounding abuse. Now, let's talk about you. You know, you before your second marriage, I'd like to find out, were you open to the idea or too emotionally scarred to entertain the thought? And during this second courtship, how were you able to break down the barriers erected by your first marriage? What values did you adopt in your thought process?
It was a bit of a struggle because I didn't want to entertain it. Anybody of the opposites, I didn't even want it. I was a church service, and one of the ministers asked me and said, "Do you want to get married again?" And I looked at him for a very long time. And just nonchalantly, I said, yeah. And he said, okay. And he walked away. He didn't speak to me again. He didn't say anything to me again. But I believe at that point, it was like God was asking, does she want this or does it? But nonchalantly, I just said, yeah, why not, if not? But then I just didn't want it. Because I didn't want the stress. I didn't want, because everything that is going to be part of it. But one thing I did was I guided myself. And I said, whoever this person is, I have to tell them where I have been, what I will not condone. And you know what, if you lay your hands on me once, I'm out. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'm just out. So I had values for myself that, you know what, I am valuable, and you know, I love myself too much, and I love life. I'm not going to put myself at jeopardy again. So all of those things I had to put in place, and it didn't mean that, oh, it was smooth sailing, because even when I got married and we had a misunderstanding, I'm always looking, where is the knife at? Where is this at? Where is that? You know, because of the trauma I have been through, I thought, and he kept on saying, what are you looking for? I am not doing this to you. I'm not going to do that to you. But my mind could not say you wouldn't do it if I say something out of line, because I don't even know when I'm going to be out of line. I'm not going to know when I'm going to say a word that is going to trigger you, because I don't know you that well. I know you, but I'm still rediscovering you, because now when we live together is when I'm going to know you. So I had all of those things at the back of my mind, and I was processing them. And you know what, after a while, I began to relax that, you know what, okay, he's not going to do this. This is not going to happen. You need to chill out. You need to relax, and you just need to go with the flow. Because you know what, if you keep on doing this, you are not going to pass this stage, because you're going to be at loggerheads all the time. And he's going to get tired, and I will get tired, and he's not going to last. So I had to ensure that, you know what, but I was talking, I was communicating how I was feeling throughout. So it wasn't like, oh, I wasn't going to speak. So if I'm out of line, tell me, oh, I don't like the way you spoke to me this way. Maybe you could have said it this way, and I get it. So, you know, I just kept on speaking. I kept on communicating so that, you know what, you understand me and I understand him. And that's how it was a journey. But yes, that's where we were. But to the glory of God, we thank God.
All right, then.
A different story now.
Yes, so we're going to go on another short break now. When we come back, we're going to talk more about how to, you know, highlight these red flags and solutions as well. You're still watching Perspectives here on Arise News. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Arise News. You're still watching Perspectives. Thank you for staying with us. We're still discussing sexual-based violence and, of course, domestic abuse. And I'm still in the studio with Anne and, of course, Lola. So now let's talk about, well, we've spoken about solutions a bit, but now I want us to use the last quarter of the show to really hone in on it. But before doing that, I want us to talk about those red flags, because that's where I believe it's the telltale signs come from. In any kind of relationship, it gets to a point where the person starts to show you who they really are. So when you think about, you know, those red flags or whatever, how would you advise either victims or people in relationships? What are the kind of things they need to look out for in a partner that could be sexually violent or practice domestic abuse in itself? Yeah.
Okay. So during courtship, you know, there are some signs to look out for: over possessiveness, jealousy, isolation. Abusers are very deliberate. Once they come in, they say, everybody around you is evil. Your mother is a witch. Your friends are promiscuous. So they try to isolate their prey from that support system, because they know that if they do that successfully and the violence now starts to occur, who is that person who is the survivor going to reach out to? Since you've successfully isolated him or her from their support system. There's also quick involvement. We meet today, we get married tomorrow. It's a red flag, because studies have shown that people that do that, they do it so that they trap you into the marriage, and you don't have the opportunity to see who they really are, right? You know, it's easier to call off an engagement than walk out of a marriage.
Wow.
It's let's not say it's easier.
It's better. It's the consequences are less.
Yes, especially when children are not involved.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to co-parent with this person, you know. So quick involvement is another red flag. There's a phenomenon referred to as love bombing. I recently heard about that. where there's this overload of emotions
Love
and feelings
and
affection. And then it's almost like when you're not reciprocating with that same energy, then there's a problem, you know. Look at the way the person speaks to people that work for them. Look at the way they interact with, you know, their staff. These are little signs that you can tell if this person is going to be abusive towards you. And then there are some little statements. Once we get married, you are stopping that your banking work. But there's no alternative. You met this person in the banking hall. This person is a graduate. And you say, once we get married, and it comes, of course, as a joke. But then you are in the marriage 2-3 years, and truly, there's an ultimatum. You know, so there are red flags. There are red flags. It's just, are people enlightened enough to realize that these flags are real? Some people say they are not just red, they are crimson. And what do you do? You know, how do you address it? And as I said, DV is not something you can wish away.
Yeah. I'm going to come to Anne very quickly because we're about to wrap up. But if anybody was watching this now and wanted to reach out to you, please just quickly share that information.
Yes.
What's the best way that they can do that?
They can call us. We have a toll-free line, 08000 333 08000 333 accessible 24/7.
That's very easy to remember.
Yes.
08000
333. And we're also on social media at Lagos DSVA.
Thank you so much. I'd like to come to you, Anne, in your final words or advice to, as someone who survived, domestic violence, what would you say to people who are in that situation now and are looking for a way out?
I would say you need to speak up. You need to reach out because what people who are going through this kind of in this kind of area, what they go through is that they keep quiet. But you need to speak up because if you don't speak up, then how can the help come? And I always say that. You know what, I will always say a broken relationship is better than a broken marriage. Just as Lola has already said, I mentioned all those red flags. They are very, very true. So when you know that you are experiencing that or you are in it, first of all, speak up, go and get help, confide in somebody, have your own community, and make sure that you are always, people can reach you wherever you are, or they know where you are. Because you know what, when that person isolates you from everybody else, then it becomes a very challenging experience. And always look at that, okay, whatever experience you go through, you're going to use it to encourage everybody else. Ruth went through an experience and then she listened. You always have to have a voice of reasoning. Who are you listening to? Listen to somebody that is going to tell you what to do so that you can get yourself and set yourself free. Ruth had a mother-in-law and she set herself free and she's in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Joseph listened to the prison officers, even though he was locked up. Esther listened to Mordecai. So you always have to have someone that you can know that you will listen to. Have someone in your corner that has got you and know that when they don't hear from you, they will call you. So that there is that communication and that there's somebody that you two are accountable to, so that you know they can get you out of that situation on time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with us. Of course, Executive Secretary, Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, Titilola Vivour-Adeniyi, and economist, teacher, and trained therapeutic counselor, Anne Ogunlesi. I appreciate you being on here, sharing your stories, and of course, your analysis on this very important subject. Well, talking about these issues openly will help end the shame and stigma that domestic violence and sexual assault survivors are burdened with. The next time you're in a room with people, think about this. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience violence from their partners in their lifetimes. 1 in 3 teens experience sexual or physical abuse or threats from a boyfriend or girlfriend in a year. 1 in 5 women are survivors of rape. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And finally, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men were sexually abused before the age of 18. Educating yourself and others, helping a friend who has been abused, speaking up and being an engaged bystander are all examples of things you can do to help. Well, that's all we have time for today. You've been watching Perspectives here on Arise News with me, Shaitan Atigari. Stay safe and have a brilliant week ahead.